So bottom line, it sounds to me like not, do you think 90% or more of the COVID deaths were due to the medical community and not the virus?
It's it's got so many moving parts, right? So I was very careful to say people who were said to have died of COVID, and this opens a big can of worms. How many people actually had COVID who were put on these protocols? We don't know that. We don't know the answer to that question. How many people were put on remdesivir when it made no clinical sense at all? And how many of those people died or had their organs seriously injured? We don't know. How many people were rushed to intubation and event who, in any other situation in the entire history of medicine, would never have been put on event, because event is the last extreme that you go to. And Mark Bischoffsky can really get into that in detail. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know, but I think the number is hundreds of thousands were killed by the protocols. And we've got precedents for this. I mean, this has happened before in other times in history, where un, an ill-advised protocol was accepted. But here's the thing about this protocol: it was not only promulgated and disseminated, it was enforced with an iron fist. And that's one of the things we have in the book. We have the financial incentives that were given. There were incentives given to give remdesivir. There were incentives to put people on venting quickly. The cash register rang every time you ran somebody through a course of remdesivir. The cash register rang every time you put somebody, you intubated somebody and put them on a vent. It rang again when you kept somebody on a vent for more than 96 hours. And I hope Mark will address that, because it makes no clinical sense. It follows no historical precedent in medicine, and it makes no logical sense. So I can't give you the exact number. And I think it would take many, many people spending thousands of hours to start to drill down and figure out how many, but I'm going to guess hundreds of thousands.
And is there any precedent for this happening for any other condition? And why do you need to incentivize hospitals to put people to give people remdesivir? Why do you need to incentivize hospitals to treat people, quote, correctly? Why would you need to incentivize hospitals? Shouldn't they be doing the right things on their own? Why the necessary force from above? Why is it necessary for there to be protocols that doctors have to not deviate from and obey without question? Why is that necessary?
Yeah. And why was it necessary when experienced nurses stood up, spoke up, and said, hey, this isn't going well. This isn't the right thing to do. We're injuring people. We're killing people. Why were they shut down? Why were they fired? Why were they blackballed from their profession? Why were their licenses attacked? Why were trolls set after them? So there's a lot of moving parts here. There's whoever figured out this protocol. Then there's the people who figured out the incentives. And then there's the people who figured out the enforcement. So it doesn't look like an accident. I think we can safely assume it was no accident.
And so there's nothing, there's no precedent for what happened in all of history, as far as you know.
Well, if you look back at Fauci's other greatest hit back in the 1980s, he managed to get a drug called AZT, which had previously been banned for human use. He managed to speed that through, and he managed to, tell everybody it was going to solve the AIDS crisis. And there are legitimate researchers that think at least 300,000 people were killed by AZT. So it not only has not that wasn't in the hospitals, right? But not only has it been done, it was done before, under Fauci's watch.